And welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today we're going to talk about Joan I, Countess of Auvergne. Lady Joan was born in the year of her Lord 1326, the same year, probably, as Joan the Fair Maid of Kent. Approximately, because we don't have exact dates, but they were contemporaries. Her parents were William XII, Count of Auvergne, and his wife, Marguerite. She was their only child, and I'm not exactly sure why, as it doesn't seem, to my knowledge, to have been explained. But when she was just 6 years old, her father died, and Joan became the Countess of Auvergne. How did he die? I don't know. The extent of my knowledge is that William died in 1332. The end. Just 6 years later, at the age of 12, Joan was married. Don't love that. But as a 12-year-old countess, she likely needed the security marriage would give her. She would not probably be kidnapped on the side of the road. 12-year-old Joan married 15-year-old Philip, who became, upon their marriage, the Count of Auvergne, because married women didn't have property rights. It's odd connections time, so fast forward if you don't care about these connections. But Joan's father-in-law was Otto IV. We haven't talked about him much, but his two sisters have episodes. Margaret of Burgundy and Joan of Burgundy were both queens of France, and both have episodes. They are also both aunts of Joan's husband, our Joan. The couple, being so young, waited to start a family. 6 years into their marriage, Joan, 18, and Philip, 21, had their first child, a little girl named Joan, after her paternal grandmother. And just the next year, Joan had her second baby, at 20, another little girl named Margaret, named after her maternal grandmother. But she died very young, and we don't have many details of her short life. The very next year, Joan was expecting again, and this time it was a boy. Philip I of Burgundy was born in 1346. Joan's husband, 22-year-old Philip, was out on campaign with his father. While on this siege, Philip fell from his horse and died. Wear your helmets, kids. Now, Joan was a 19-year-old single mother of two, 2-year-old Joan and baby Philip. So she did the obvious next thing and betrothed her 3-year-old daughter to 4-year-old Amadeus, the future Count of Savoy. And you don't have to remember him, but he will be mentioned again in Joan of Bourbon's episode, because instead of marrying Joan, he was marrying Joan of Bourbon's sister, Bona, because everyone's related. And then it seems that Joan had fallen in love, or the Duke of Normandy had fallen in love with her. She was a single mother of 2, and he was a single father of 8. He had, just months ago, lost his wife Bona to the bubonic plague. Check out her episode for those details. The Duke of Normandy had been meant to marry her cousin Blanche, but the Duke's father, the king, had fallen in love with Blanche. So John, the Duke of Normandy, had shifted his attentions to Blanche's cousin Joan. They didn't really seem to have any reason to get married, unless they just wanted to, or maybe it was a safety in numbers thing, but I hope it was love. So 31-year-old Duke John married 24-year-old Countess Joan, the cousin of her first husband. Her old father-in-law was the brother of her new mother-in-law, because everyone's related. They got married in February, 11 days after Joan's cousin married Joan's father-in-law. 6 months later, Duke John's father, King Philip VI, died. The king is dead. Long live the king. The new king was Joan's husband, King John II, and Joan was, in addition to a countess and a duchess, also the queen consort of France. 3 months after they began their reign, and about 9 months after the wedding, Queen Joan had the king's baby. Princess Blanche was born, but she died shortly after birth. 2 years later, 27-year-old Joan had another baby, another girl, Princess Catherine, but she too died just after birth. The following year, 28-year-old Queen Joan was having another baby, This time it was a boy, but he also died just after birth. It was around this time that Joan's 11-year-old daughter was released from her betrothal way back in the episode to Amadeus, remember him? She ended up going to live in a convent. It was a whole Treaty of Paris thing. Amadeus was going to marry someone else. In 1356, Joan's husband, King John the Good, was captured while fighting back against Edward the Black Prince, the Prince of Wales. Now, Edward started it. He was bringing his army through France without permission, and King John was just going to stop him. A papal legate was trying to avoid war. He went back and forth between the two sides, trying to settle it, but it was a no-go. There would be a battle. On the day of the battle, King John and 17 of his knights dressed identically, so the king could not be easily recognized on the battlefield. Despite the French fighting hard, they couldn't stand up to the volleys of the English longbowmen. The English longbowmen were harsh. On top of that, King John, fighting with his battle axe, had his helmet knocked off, so they could now recognize the king. Surrounded, he fought on until a French exile who fought for England approached him. "Sire," he said, "I am a knight of Artois. Yield yourself to me, and I will lead you to the Prince of Wales." And just like that, King John of France was captured by the English. And Joan was left behind in France to await her husband's return. Now, before you feel too badly for King John, he was treated well in England. He stayed in palaces with the royal family. He just wasn't free to leave. As a prisoner of the English, John was granted royal privileges that permitted him to travel and enjoy a regal lifestyle. In a time when law and order was breaking down in France, and the government was having a hard time raising money for the defense of the realm, King John's account books show that during his captivity, he was purchasing horses, pets, and clothes while maintaining an astrologer and a court band. He was living a far more luxurious life than his wife Joan over in France. It took 3.5 years, but a ransom was finally set for the King of France at 3 million crowns, and the transfer plans for the king back to France began. There was a bit of a goodbye, well-wishing ceremony vibes that had to take place. It was John's farewell tour of 1360. He finally reached English-held Calais on the 8th of July, 1360. And I failed to find when he was officially back home, but just 2 months after the king arrived in Calais and was exchanged for one of his sons until ransom was paid, the queen's daughter died at the convent she had been living in at the age of just 16. And just 18 days after the death of her daughter, Queen Joan also passed at the age of about 34. Her possessions were inherited by her only surviving child, Philip I, Duke of Normandy. And if you follow his family tree down about 2 centuries, you will eventually get to Philip the Handsome, the husband of Juana la Loca, of Why Am I Mad, Philip fame. If you know, you know. And that is where I'll leave it for now. What did you think of Joan I, Countess of Auvergne and Queen of France? I don't know how she did it, but she attempted to hold France together through her husband's captive years, and it takes a lot of strength. It took 3.5 years to arrange ransom payments, and she only may have lived to see her husband again. At most, they had a month or 2 together, but her husband would rather quickly rebound with a teenager, so don't feel too bad for him. You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com or on Facebook or Instagram at Long Live the Queen Podcast, or join us on Patreon. The link is in the show description. On Fridays, we have book club. Long live to all the queens out there, and until next time, bye.
You'll be remembered.
Thanks for listening.